Welcome, everybody. My name is Sabrina. I am the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation in Denver, Colorado, and I am very excited to welcome everyone this afternoon. This workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation, or EDF, and Alsana. Tonight's workshop is What is Body Image Really? And I'm very excited for this really relevant and important topic. So a little bit about the Eating Disorder Foundation and Alsana before we introduce our speaker. EDF was founded in 2003. Our mission is to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based foundation that is now very grateful to be serving individuals and families internationally. And now I'd like to invite Raina Davis from Alsana to just share a little bit about their organization.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Sabrina. So grateful to be here tonight with all of you and also with my colleague, Lolly. I am the outreach director for Alsana and just wanted to share a little bit about our programs, just so that you have a sense of Alsana. And hopefully, if we can ever be helpful, I hope that goes without saying, we're definitely here to be a resource for the community. We are an eating recovery community, and we work with clients of all genders. Everything that we do is based on our adaptive care model, which, as it says, is adaptive. It looks a little bit different for each client. So we have the therapeutic, medical, and nutritional components, as well as a pretty unique movement component and relational component. And just to let you know, we have several beautiful communities that are for in-person programming in Missouri, Alabama, and California, but we also have virtual programming in over 15 states. And so that can be a really wonderful option, no travel involved. So like I said, we're really here to be a resource, whether that looks like engaging Alsana, whether that looks like just finding local resources for you. We are here to help in any way that we can. So thank you again for being with us tonight, and I hope you really enjoy the discussion. And Sabrina, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Raina. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 emails in the chat to everybody. The first one is for the Eating Disorder Foundation, and the second one is directly to Raina. If you have questions about either of our organizations and the services that we provide, those are direct contacts for us. Continuing on, we'll invite everybody to use the chat feature for the rest of the workshop if you'd like to communicate. It is private chat. It will come to me directly, and hopefully at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time to do some Q&A. So you can send me a message throughout the workshop, and we'll cover as much as we can. After the presentation is complete, it usually takes us 24 to 48 hours to get the recording uploaded, and we will send, if you're registered, we'll send you a copy and you'll get that. It also will be posted on our YouTube channel with the rest of our previous workshops, so you'll be able to access those as well. Quickly, I'd like to thank everyone who was able to contribute a donation when you did register for this free event. It is how the Eating Disorder Foundation is able to provide services by the donations we receive. If you are interested in making a donation and you haven't, I will go ahead and put another link to that in the chat. And now the fun part, I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Lolly started her career as a special education teacher working with kids with autism. After completing her master's degree, she began working for Alsana as a primary therapist. Throughout her time at Alsana, she has been lead therapist, director of clinical services for residential, and now regional executive director. Lolly also spent a year and a half as a clinical director of a substance abuse program. She is trained in EMDR and has an advanced training in Somatic Experiencing. Lolly is also a certified eating disorder specialist. Lolly has always had a passion for wanting to help those with eating disorders. She loves forming relationships with people and loves being able to hold hope in recovery for all. And when she's not holding all those helpful roles, Lolly enjoys time outside, hanging out with her husband and kids, and Broadway musicals. So Lolly, I will pass this over to you. Thanks for being here tonight. Excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for spending your night with me. Well, it's night maybe for some of you. I am at home and one of my kiddos is sick, so he might make a surprise appearance at some point, same with my dog. So just a heads up, I was navigating a kid eating dinner and a dog barking. So thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to dive right in, and then, like Sabrina said, I'll try and make sure that I end a little early so that there could be some time for questions and answers, if that would be helpful. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right one. All right. Mm-hmm. All right, so I don't know. I think it was at some point last year. Yeah, it was probably some point last year. Someone had started to like ask me at work, hey, what would you be interested in presenting on? What are things that interest you, topics that interest you? And we were kind of tossing around different things and talking about what might be helpful for the community, for professionals, for individuals, all those kind of things. And the topic of body image got brought up. And at first I was like, yes, this is a great topic. I would be so excited to do this. I would be excited for a lot of reasons. I think it's something that I feel really passionate about. I feel really passionate about how we cultivate relationships with our bodies and how that plays into recovery or into the eating disorder. I also feel like it's one of those things that like I didn't get a lot of training on, and I still don't know that there's like a ton out there on body image. I think it's one of those things that, I feel like a lot of times you'll hear like, oh, well, body image is the last thing to change, so just hang tight. And it's like, well, that sucks. Like that, who wants that to be the response, right? So I think I really wanted to start to dig in to say, how do we look at body in a different way? I also, like Sabrina said, I'm trained in somatic experiencing, and somatic experiencing is a type of philosophy modality of therapy. And it's a lot about looking at what happens in the body when we experience trauma. And trauma could be a lot of different things. Trauma could be misattunement with a parent. Trauma could be a car accident. Trauma could be a sexual assault. And so I've spent the last, probably 4 years engaging in these trainings. And it's really shifted the way that I view eating disorders, the way that I view trauma in our bodies and all that kind of stuff. So I think I wanted to start to like dig into that. So I started to do this, and then I was like, oh gosh, this is actually like a really vulnerable topic. I think I initially, when I was like thinking about this, for anybody that's like does Enneagram stuff, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and 3s like to look put together and be confident and competent and all the things. And I started to like dig in, and I was like, oh, I think this is going to like require me to get vulnerable. And I was like, oh gosh, am I ready and willing to do that in like a bigger platform? And then I thought of these crazy kids. So these are my kiddos. May is 6, and then Teddy is 5, and then Eleanor, this was taken last summer, she's actually 18 months now, and I am actually pregnant with my 4th, so I'm due in July. I know it's crazy, it's exciting, but a little insane. But I think I started to, I've been in the eating disorder field for a while now, and then having May and starting to be a mom, I started to witness this process of watching May start to grow up and go through, initially kids are like running around the house naked. There's like no modesty, no awareness or anything like that, right? And then I think in this last probably 2 years, I've started to notice that May is starting to gain more awareness and start to ask more questions. She's asking more questions about my body. She's asking questions about her body. She's asking she's just like very observant. And I think I started to think about like, I've got to dig into this topic, because if I want things to be different, not just for like people that I work with now and individuals that we treat, but like, I want it to be different for my daughter, like regardless of whether or not she has or will ever have an eating disorder or anything like that. Like, I just want her to have a different experience than I had growing up. And so I think I started to she started to ask me questions and things that it's like, well, I know how I would answer this as a therapist, but like, how do I answer this as a mom? And then I was like, why are those two different answers? Maybe they shouldn't be. What's that about? Why are they two different answers? And so I think that's kind of what pushed me into this place of like challenging some vulnerability on my own part, and really trying to push, I think, other clinicians and just anybody that has like any connection in this field to like really start to like ask hard questions and get vulnerable. I will also say that I come at this presentation being a white female, heterosexual, and I've lived in a smaller body for most of my life. So I also, I 100% can recognize my privilege in that. And so I also want to just name that. I know that I don't have lived experiences that other people have. But I think like that's part of this, right? Like as individuals, we have to like gain our own awareness of what is my own experience, what is my own sense of my body, and then how does that impact how I engage with other people in the world, whether that's as a therapist or a mom or a friend or whatever. So that's a long-winded way of how we got to this topic. So we're going to start. The very basic definition of body image or body is the physical structure of a person or animal, including bones, flesh, organs, just real basic, right? And then the definition of image is a representation of the external form of a person and thing in art, the general impression that a person, organization, or product presents to the public. So I started to really dig into how has body image been defined in the world up until this point. And I found some like definitions. I think I landed in this place of there's kind of three buckets that to me apply to body image. So one is, how do you feel or sense your body? Like literally, can I feel my fingers? Can I connect to sensations? Feelings in my body? Am I aware of like all my extremities? Am I aware of my toes? So really, truly like this felt sense of being in our body and experiencing it. And then I think another piece of body image is what we believe about our body and our appearance. And then I think the third piece is, how do we feel about our body? And so what I think often happens is that we will look at like one of these things and not all of them together. So we will look at only what we believe about our body and stay just in like our belief system and kind of dig in there, but we won't connect to our body. And so then as someone's like trying to navigate recovery and move along, if they're only trying to work on like the belief revision, but not working on also, how do I revise what I feel in my body? It doesn't shift. And I think that is where I think a lot of people can get frustrated. I feel like we hear this often where people will be like, Lolly, like, how am I supposed to continue to follow my meal plan, not engage in behaviors, do what I'm doing when I like cannot tolerate my body? I cannot tolerate how I feel in my body. I cannot tolerate the thoughts or the feelings or whatever. And I think, so I think that a big piece of this body image work to me is about being able to say, like, how do we work on beliefs and sensations and feelings like in a simultaneous manner? And how do we make sure that those things are occurring, obviously not perfectly, like always simultaneously, but at least somewhat congruently and somewhat consistently. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is like, how do we even start to do that? What does that even look like? All those kind of things. I love this quote so much. Can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be? I love this quote because I think one, because I've seen it, I see it in May of like who she is as this like little girl and just the best thing in the world. And then I also see her starting to like take in information about the world around her and decide like, should I be like that or not? You know, and it's like, I don't know. I think it's like, that's what we all bring into this work, right? Is we all bring into this lifetime of experiences in which we've had so many places, people, institutions tell us who we should be, how we should be, what we should look like, what we shouldn't look like, all this stuff. And it always kind of, I don't know, it always kind of grounds me to think about like, who was I, or what did I believe about my body before I started believing all this other stuff? Like, how did that shift? Where did that change? Why did it change? And like, what would it be like to start to make my way back to some of that stuff? So I just always love this when I'm thinking about body, because it just like, I don't know, it just like always, yeah, like I said, it just like grounds me. It brings me right back there to like, actually, Lolly, what actually do you believe? Not what you think this person thinks or what this person thinks or what, you know, but what do I truly believe about what my body should be or what I should be or any of that kind of stuff. So I think that, again, to me, the work around like, how do we start to engage with our bodies differently? How do we start to understand what we believe about our body image or our bodies? It's like pulling the thread and like trying to figure out how these things connect, right? And what I would challenge you is, I think that there's times where, for a lot of different reasons, it probably feels safer to like stay in one lane. And if you just stay in the one lane, you don't ever see the thread start to go through things, right? And so then you just keep driving down this one lane and things don't shift. And in reality, they're all so interconnected. So one thing I often would have people do is like just do a free write stream of consciousness kind of thing, right? And so we'll say, okay, tell me, what's the first thought you have about your body or something? And it's like, my body is disgusting. And then we'll just write it all out. Like, what are all the thoughts, feelings I have? And we'll do this for like 2 minutes. I don't know, maybe that's a really long time, maybe a minute. And what you see in that is that there's actually these big threads that occur, right? And then so it goes from like, what do I believe about my body to what do I believe about myself to what do I believe about the world? And so if I just stayed in the lane of like, let's just talk about how to revise my body's disgusting or how to reframe that or do that, like that's important to do. But then I never actually get to the fact that like, actually, part of what my body is disgusting is actually about me, that like, I don't feel okay. And like, I feel disgusting. I have a sense of disgust. And what that actually connects to is like this feeling of like, if anybody actually saw that, they wouldn't love me, or I'm not capable of being loved, or I'm not worthy of it. And so I think a big part of this work and about understanding what is our body image is about starting to tease through these things and like stretch it out to figure out like what actually is going on here. Because it's actually, I get the thing of like, it's not about the body, but it is. Like, it's not about the food, but it is. I really do think it's like, you can't do recovery without your body. Like it is your body. It has to come along the process, right? And so how do I start to understand and separate out what I believe about my body, what I believe about myself, what I believe about the world, and like, where do those beliefs actually come from? And how do I end up experiencing them like in my body or in my relationships? So tease it out. That's repetitive. So I I like when working in the past, let me rephrase. In the past, I feel like when I like talked about like doing body image work, it feels like unintentionally, I feel like there's times where I'm telling someone there's a finish line. And like, if you can just do this, this, and this, you'll get to this place and you'll feel differently about your body. And what I want to start telling and making sure that I'm communicating and pushing people to understand is there's no finish line here, guys. There's not a place, there's not a, it's just not there. To me, body image is actually about thinking about it in terms of relationship. Like what my relationship looks like with, we call her Mei. What my relationship with Mei looks like today is going to look very different than what it looks like when she's a teenager versus when she's an adult. None of it is good, bad, right, wrong. It's just moving. It's changing. I think about like, you know, if I think about where I was and what my body was in like college versus what it is now as a woman who is pregnant and gonna give birth in a few months, like it's different. And so I think we have to start to wrap our heads around like, how do I view this work of specifically around body image is actually about cultivating a relationship with my body and starting to develop a relationship. And that relationship is going to change. It's going to move. It's going to ebb. It's going to flow, but it's not black or white. It's not good or bad. And it's also not like, well, if I just get to this place, there's not contingencies there, right? It's not like, well, if Mei just acts this way, then I'll love her. It's like, no, I love her today and I'll love her tomorrow, but like, why don't we do that with our own bodies? And so really it's about starting to like, think about building a relationship with your body. Cause it's funny, like if you think about like, well, would I don't know, like if you put into perspective of like changing the language of like, I would treat this person in a relationship, but then I'm not like doing that with my own body. Like that it doesn't match or correlate. So when I think about a healthy relationship, I think about having non-judgment. And I will argue, well, I don't know that I would argue this. I feel like non-judgment is different than neutral. Like when I say neutral, it feels like there's almost an apathy there at times, whereas non-judgment really truly feels like I'm coming in from like a curious place. Like it's not like I am interested, but I'm not making judgment. I'm really curious about things. There's boundaries. There's boundaries about what, boundaries between myself and my body. What can it do? What can it not do? What do I feel okay with? What do I not feel okay with? All of those kind of things. Open communication, which is like about expressing and listening to your body. I will tell this story. I have some medical issues and oftentimes it like seems to spring up out of nowhere, right? It'll be like, all of a sudden I'll be like in a lot of pain and it comes out of nowhere. And I was talking to my sister one time and she was like, do you ever notice that like these things kind of happen when you are like on vacation or when you take time off or like when you slow down? And I was like, yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. And she said, I wonder if you're actually feeling something all along the way, but you're not paying attention to it. And then you like allow yourself to relax and connect to your body. And then you're like, oh no, something's not right. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. I'm someone that can go and move in a very fast pace and sometimes do it in a disconnected way. And so for me, like open communication with my body is actually being able to be present with my body and like hear my body, but then also respond in like a appropriate way and not be like, just tough it up, Lally, get over it, keep going, but really actually taking in that. Being present and engaged. We're going to talk about how do you get present in your body and what does that look like? And then I talked about not fixed, but like adaptive and moving. And then acceptance. And my caveat will be like, my caveat is acceptance isn't I love you and all your imperfections. Who the hell decided they were imperfections? I don't know. Like, to me, a relationship is about saying like, I love you, period, or I accept you, period. And so really starting to even challenge that part of like, if I view myself as having imperfections, like where does that belief come from? How did that develop? Why did that develop? And so this relationship, this idea of the relationship with your body is about starting to kind of rewrite the story and rewrite the relationship. It is what it is, and you've gotten to the place that you've gotten to for a lot of reasons. And most of those reasons are about like protectiveness, about creating safety, all those kind of things. And then recovery is about saying like that was necessary then, but it's not necessary now. And how do I learn how to start to do this different? How do I learn this? And we talk about this all the time, like, right, in therapy, you're talking all the time about how do we build a different relationship with our emotions, with those around us, with people that love us. And so why are we not also talking about our bodies in that same way, and not treating it as, again, that's something that we just have to like either wait around for it to like get better, or it should just be like, I can think my way through this. Instead, it's like, we need to also start to relearn how to have a relationship with your body. My body, my shape, my rules. And so I would challenge you all to start to think about what would that mean to kind of rewrite where you want to go, or what you want it to be like, or what you would hope it could look like. Curiosity is going to be, I think it's like I think curiosity is like the way into a lot of things, right? But I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming or scary to kind of dive into like, I don't know, to dive into stuff. And so starting with just curiosity of like, well, where did I learn this? Like, if I have a day and I'm walking through my day and I have like a negative body image thought or whatever, starting just to think about like, where did that come from? When did I first start to believe this? I think really like thinking about where are the places, what are the messages that triggered shame in my body or triggered me to have shame in my body? What are those messages that I've gotten about it? When did I start to ignore my body? I think that's a big one that I know I talk a lot about with people is how do you like start to trust your body again? There's reasons that maybe we stop trusting our body. Maybe it's because people told us we couldn't trust our body or whatever. And so then it's like, well, what would it look like to rebuild that trust? And I think getting curious about like, what do you want your relationship to look like with your body? What you want in a relationship with your body might be different than what I want. And that's okay. That's your decision to make. And so whenever I give this presentation, and it's tweaked a little bit, but if I'm giving it to like mainly only like clinicians, I always want to push them to say like, are you helping people get to your goal of what you think a body relationship should look like? Or is it actually the individual's goal? Because I think that's so important. Like that's how we recognize our own privilege, our own bias, our own experiences in this, to say, I don't actually know what makes sense for you. And I don't know where you're starting from. So you tell me, when you think about having a different relationship with your body, what would that look like? What would that feel like? Versus having me as a therapist tell you what it should be, because that's not, we have different bodies, we're different people. So we have to learn how to be present in our bodies. I think this is probably one of the hardest things. There's like sun right in my eyeballs. I think this is the hardest thing. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I will say for me, this is one of the hardest parts of body image work, is like getting slowing myself down. I have to be so intentional about connecting to my body. I feel like I'm making this story up in my head and I'm comparing my insides to others' outsides, but I feel like I see some people move about the world and they're like, just like so connected and in it. And like, I have to work really hard to like be present in my body. It's not something that I was taught. It's not something that comes naturally. I have to really, I have to be really intentional about it. And so I can't start to build a relationship if I can't start to know what I feel in my body or what I experience in my body. What sensations do I experience? This can feel really, really, really scary if you have had experiences where things didn't feel okay in your body. And so we'll talk a little bit about like, how do we like start to kind of dip our toe in this? But also thinking like, you can start really far out and like work your way in. For some people, it's going to feel like way too much just to even say like, hey, what do you notice in your body? But sometimes it's like, can I notice my toes? Like, can I wiggle my toes and connect to them and feel them? That's all I can tolerate right now. That's all that feels okay. And that's okay. Cool. Like, let's start there. You can use like the idea of boundaries in the sense of like, can you feel your feet on the floor? Could you feel yourself sitting in the chair? I have like fidgets in my office. Like, can you feel the ball in your hands or something? So it doesn't have to go. I think the fear is often that like, if I go there, I'm going to go in and it's going to feel so bad and so intolerable. And then I'm not going to know how to get out. And the only way I know how to get out is to use my eating disorder or some other maladaptive behavior. Right. And so how do you start to like slowly kind of like get to know your body and take it in a pace that feels okay to you? What I will say though is like, you got to do that work. If you don't do that work, like you're going to get stuck in like trying to rewrite the narrative, but then it doesn't change. And I'll tell you why it doesn't change. So it doesn't change because if we try and like learn new skills or learn new things, when we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, our brain, like literally, this is true for every single person in the world, it can't take in that information. And so if let's say if I'm in flight mode, that's probably my go-to place of like being a worrier, anxious, hypervigilant, that kind of place. If I am really stuck in that place and I'm like really, I call it being like stuck on, if I'm stuck on and I'm trying to do work that says, Lolly, actually, your body is not wrong. Your body is okay. It's not like landing in the part of my brain that I actually need it to land in. And so what happens is my nervous system stays up in flight mode. I continue to feel distress in my body because being in flight mode doesn't feel great. And then I get frustrated because I'm like, why am I not changing? Why do I not feel different about my body? And so part of getting present, or this concept of getting present, is actually about being able to come and dip down into this like ventral vagal part of your brain where learning can occur and like relationship building can occur. You don't have to get there and stay there. No one stays there all the time. That's not realistic. But to start to like be able to experience it a smidge in your body, like that's how we start to get a sense of like presence and awareness in our body. So I think there's a lot around starting to understand like, where do I kind of function and sit, understanding myself. Like I said, I'm someone who tends to like be stuck on. A lot of people will go from like being stuck on in like fight or flight mode, and then they drop down into freeze mode. And it's just kind of this back and forth. And this is like totally like a trauma response, right? Like your sympathetic nervous system is the gas, and your parasympathetic is the brake. What happens though sometimes in trauma is that like the gas gets floored and then the brake gets floored. And so we go like in this kind of jerkiness of like in and out, in and out, in and out. And it's a response to the trauma, right? It's a response to saying like, I can't. And it's protective in nature, right? And what I believe about trauma is that like when trauma occurs and we don't have the safety after whatever the event was or whatever occurred to process it or to move and like move with it and through it, then our bodies actually don't get to know that it's over. And so that's what keeps us in this place of getting stuck on or stuck off, right? And so part of what you sometimes will feel in your body that feels so intolerable is like your body still in like a stuck on or stuck off place. And if we can like get into our body and start to feel different things in our body, it allows us to dip down and say like, oh, actually maybe that did feel like it then, and now it's over. And so starting to get into that place. Checking my time because I'm not great about time. So what does that mean? There's this really good book. It's called Burnout. It's by the Nagasaki sisters. I think that's how you say it. They have there's a podcast with Brene Brown, and they're talking about their book. The one sister's a composer and like a conductor. And the other sister is like a sex therapist. The one sister wrote a book. It's called Come As You Are. It's a great book about like female, understanding female like sexual arousal and your body and all that kind of stuff. It's phenomenal. Well, now they wrote this book called Burnout about the stress cycle and how to like kind of move through it. And I'm going to butcher it. I think it's on the podcast. Maybe it's in the audiobook, but they give a really good definition of like wellness. What is wellness? And wellness isn't that we never feel anything bad or intolerable or uncomfortable, right? Wellness is the idea that I can move between two things and not get stuck in one place or another. I think we talk a lot about this around like emotional regulation, but the same is true for our body. Like, can I feel something that feels really uncomfortable, intolerable, painful in my body? But then can I also move into something that feels okay or pleasant or relaxing or peaceful or safe? And so what often happens, I think, within our eating disorders is that we end up moving between like getting activated and feeling that on our body, and it feels really bad. And then what we end up pendulating to or moving back and forth between is like activation and trauma. So it's like, I feel activated and then trauma stuff gets triggered and I feel that. And then I just like keep going back and forth between the two. And it feels horrible. Like that is not a pleasant thing to do, right? And so your eating disorder comes along, is like, hey, cool, I know how to kind of step out of this. And the eating disorder can come in and works really well as a way to like stop this cycle and give you a breath and give you a second to like not have to feel anything, or to be able to feel something pleasant or positive. And so again, this happens emotionally, but then it also happens with our bodies, right? And so the goal is actually about like, how do I start to move between activation and something that feels okay? I'm going to call it a resource for the purposes of this. And so it's this idea of starting to build a capacity to feel something other than something distressing in my body. And when I say distressing, numb can be distressing. Maybe it doesn't feel the same as like panic or rage or something, but numb is just as, I would put it as just as distressing as feeling something like that. And so we want to start to build this capacity, because again, if you think about it in terms of a relationship. No relationship is perfect. I don't walk around feeling like I don't know, like rainbows and butterflies in my marriage. Like it ebbs and flows. There's days where I'm like, oh, you're like annoying, or there's days where I get frustrated at him, vice versa, I'm sure. And then there's days that it feels wonderful. And then there's days where it's just like, it just is. And we're just moving about our lives, right? And so again, it's how do we get to that place with our bodies too? It's not, the goal isn't that I never feel anything bad again, or that I only feel good things, or that I feel nothing. The goal is to say, how do I feel something and not get stuck there? How can I feel something and then move into something different? And then maybe I move back, and then I move back, and then I move back. And so it's this process of starting to like get that, that feel competent in that, right? The other thing that happens in this is if you think of like activation as like a bullseye, right? A lot of times what happens is I shouldn't say that. I'll speak for myself. No one taught me how to like not get sucked into activation. No one taught me to say like, well, you can just go touch the edge of this and then go like move over here. And so every time I would get activated, it's like 0 to 60. Like I'm in the heart of the anxiety. I'm like smack dab in the center. I'm feeling all the things that don't feel good. And then I like panic because it's like, I don't want to feel like this for the rest of my life. What if I feel like this for the rest of my life? How do I get out? How do I get out? Well, there's lots of like ways to get out that aren't the healthiest ways. But it's like, if no one taught me otherwise, I don't know what else to do, right? And so the other part of activation is about being able to say, how do I like dip my toe in, but not have to like jump out and then jump back in and jump out and jump back in. I use this analogy often. My kids obviously like love swimming. They're like big fanatics of the pool during the summertime. I hate cold water. Like I despise jumping into a pool of cold water. I won't do it. My husband's always like, just jump in, Lolly, like get over it. I won't do it. Instead, I'll like get in and then I get out and I get in, and it stays freaking freezing the entire time I do that, right? If I just dipped my toe in and stood there for a while, I would get used to the coldness. And then I would go in a little bit more. It still maybe isn't comfortable. I still would rather be in a pool that's warmer than that, but it becomes more tolerable. And so then the same thing with activation is, it's not that we never want to like learn how to go in there, because I think that's actually where like processing happens and some deep therapeutic work happens. But it's about, how do I start to feel the very edge of this? And so same thing in your body. Like if I feel panicked or if I feel anxiety, how do I start to feel a smidge of it and then learn how to kind of move into something different? And so, and then move back, right? You don't want to just like move out. It's not like, oh, don't feel the bad things, move away. It's like, how do I learn how to, that I can move in and out of this, and I'm capable of doing that. So resourcing can be like really what you want it to be. It can be like imagery stuff. Like some people might have done safe place imagery, where you either have a place or you think of a place that's safe, and you can kind of go through your 5 senses, think about it. I think one of my go-tos is my kids. Like if I sit and think about my kids and like close my eyes and think about like them coming and giving me a hug, like I feel different in my body pretty quickly. A lot of people I know will use their animals because those animals feel super safe and super grounding. And so you could picture, if you don't actually have your animal like right by your side, you could do imagery around it. If you have your dog or your cat or whatever sitting there, then like going through your senses. Again, like, could I feel, my dog's name is Larry. Could I feel Larry sitting on me? Could I feel his fur? Could I connect? Can I feel the weight of him on me? And so you want to spend a good amount of time starting to build up that capacity to connect to something that feels either safe. It could be something that feels pleasant. A lot of times I think there's a struggle to find the pleasant. And so maybe starting with like what feels safe. Sometimes it can be like a therapist office or some place that feels safe. Sometimes clients will say, Lolly, there's like no place that feels safe. And it's like, okay, but like, how do you feel when you walk in my office? Well, it feels a little different than out there. And it's like, okay, well, let's start there. What does it feel like when you're outside of my office and then when you walk into my office? And so resourcing really, truly can be whatever you want it to be. It's just about starting to dip your toe into also feeling something that feels okay. And then as you like start to get practice at going back and forth, then you start to be able to go more into things. And then as you're doing this work, you're also doing the cognitive work of like, where did these beliefs come from? How did I learn this? What would it be like to not believe that? Obviously, activation is going to bring you into like, what are those situations in which I was taught that my body wasn't okay? And like, how do I start to work on those and do some of the therapeutic work around that? So that's kind of how it all kind of comes together. I'll just end with this quote. I'm obsessed with becoming a woman comfortable in her skin. I, again, love this because it's like, I'm becoming, like, this isn't an end process. Like where I'm at today will change in 6 months. And so I would challenge you all to start to kind of really think about, what does this look like if you're thinking about a relationship versus like a finish line, a start line, this like black and white thing. So thank you all for your attention. I'll pause. I'll stop sharing my screen. I don't know if there's any questions that had come through.
We do have some questions and some comments that I'd love to share. So firstly, I want to touch on, there was a lot of amazing feedback and interest to the fight, flight, and freeze image slide that you had. So hoping, and a lot of people are asking that we might be able to share that with everyone or something similar too.
Yeah, absolutely. You can Google it. I'm not gonna lie, I took it off of the internet, but I can also send it to you, Sabrina, and then you can distribute however.
Perfect. Yeah. I know there's a lot of different images, and to make it easier for everybody, I will attach it when we send out the recording so that you can have some of those resources all together. And also, I just wanted to share, somebody mentioned just really feeling very validated that, you weren't even covering just fight or flight, and that also freeze is a very, very real, very valid response. And that sometimes maybe that one feels a little bit overshadowed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do have a lot of questions coming in, and you have touched a little bit on this already, but can you provide, please, maybe some more examples for someone who may have experienced multiple kind of, ongoing trauma in their life, maybe not just one instance, and due to body pain and chronic pain, and riding this wave of like, okay, we know we're not in one place of how we feel about our bodies all the time. But just some, any encouragement or tips or ideas for someone who might be dealing with chronic pain.
Yeah, that question came up actually recently, in a different presentation I was doing. I will 100% say, like, I'm not an expert on chronic pain. That's not my go-to. There is a lot of good, there's a lot of good stuff. If you like look up somatic experiencing and chronic pain, there's a lot of good stuff out there of people that know far more like long-term about kind of navigating that in different, like approaches to like learning how to feel things in your body, learning how to navigate that and kind of that stuff. I think from things that I think about around this are, one, I really do believe that like part of being able to learn how to navigate chronic pain is also about like, how do I assess this without my eating disorder being present? I think it's really hard to know what am I feeling in my body if I'm like constantly bouncing between the like numb or the fight, flight, freeze place, right? And so I think part of it is about like, how do I get to a place where I can actually like start to feel things in my body? And then I think it's like, to me, the work around that is also like realizing like, okay, what is showing up in a way that is about pain today, and what is showing up that's actually about pain that occurred a long time ago, and how, like, I'm someone that feels like my emotions come out somatically, and like I can get a stomach ache or I can feel pain and those kind of things. And so how do I kind of sift through that? And then I think I would guess that I would say probably the other piece of this is like learning also, like, how do we do some grief work too around like, what am I able to feel or not feel in my body? How do I feel? And like grief around, I'm angry. The way that I interpret the question is like, trauma caused this chronic pain. And like, how do I like do grief and anger work around that happening? And like, how do I do some of that? It's not going to make the chronic pain go away. The only other thing that I'll say about this too is there's oftentimes a lot of questions about like, I've had complex or continual trauma, right? And it's occurred on over a long period of time or over multiple times. And so one of the things that is really hard, I think, in those situations is like, it wasn't over, like it ended that day, but then it was going to happen again in a week or whatever it was, right? And so what I would challenge you, and this is really, really hard, so I will just say, you might be angry at me for saying this, but what I will challenge you is even in those moments in between that, there were moments of relief. Like for some people, it's like, I got to go to school for 6 hours or 7 hours and I wasn't in my abusive home. Still meant you had to go home and the trauma still existed and the pain still existed, but finding that moment of, was there a moment in which I knew it was over, even if the over was temporary? And that's a way to also start to like help your nervous system get a timestamp of like, okay, it did end, even though I knew it was coming. There can be a lot of strong emotions about that, because it's like, screw that, Lally, like it happened again the next day. Or it's like, I get that, and that is valid and that's true. And your nervous system did settle slightly when you felt some smidgen, even if it's like a minuscule molecule of safety. So also thinking about, I think in terms of like resourcing and stuff like that, you can have that frame there too.
Thank you. So I'm going to combine two questions. So a lot of the content we reviewed today was a lot about self-reflection and the work that we can do with sort of our view and interpretation and our struggles. The next two questions, I'm going to combine them together, are about what we can do to dismantle diet culture, the oppressive systems that are really out there showing us, hey, here's what a body should and shouldn't look like. And so connecting another question, we get, where we get these messages through social media, marketing kind of all over the place, and also from individuals in our lives. So that might be a work colleague, having a conversation right next to us, or even saying something directly to us, at the lunch table or something like that. So comments on what do we do with this kind of external systems that are set up, and the society that we're all kind of swooped up in.
Yes. I don't know if I know the answer. I feel like that's a huge question, but here are my thoughts from like social media lens. I think I have spent a lot of time, especially actually probably in the last year, thinking about like, what is my brain taking in today? And it's actually like, I've gotten pretty critical about like what I watch, what I see, about social media, about who I follow, about who I don't follow, about how much time I spend on social media. There's some crazy data, and I'll only get on the soapbox for 5 seconds, but there's some crazy data out there that you can find around like when I was growing up, there was like 17 magazine, and it was like my exposure was time limited. And now I have a phone in which I could spend 10 minutes and get a tremendous amount of feedback. There's a lot of data around like, after, I can't remember exact quotes, but like after spending 10 minutes on social media, like women feel significantly worse about themselves. Men also experience that as well. So I think one part is that I struggle. I think about the advocacy and the like fighting the system a lot, and like what does that look like for me. I think I often will feel like pulled in a lot of different directions. What I will say is, like, for me, what I have landed on is like my work, my life's work is about trying to dismantle what we are being told we should be and should not be. And I feel like that's part of why I became a therapist. That's part of why I work with the people that I work with. I also think that like it is how I show up for my children. It's how I show up for my niece and my nephew. And how do I change that? Like there are things, my mom and dad are a little older, and like I know that my dad is like not going to change. It's just is not going to change around some things. But like I know that like these are the things that I will like set boundaries around with him. These are the things that I will not allow to be said around my children, to my children, and I will use my voice in those things. Obviously there's some people that are in our lives that are like safer to do that with, and others that aren't. But I think as far as like my more immediate like life, I think I've had to do a lot of digging of like, how do I stand up for what I believe in and advocate for that, so that like I don't want May to be like, well, mom, you didn't like stand up to Papa the day he said I shouldn't have an extra donut. And it's like, I don't want to be that mom. And so I think I spent a lot of time like thinking about what are my non-negotiables? What are the things that I will use my voice on? And then I think like the times that I feel insecure or don't, like I'm questioning, why am I doing that? And what do I do around that? And then I think just in general, trying to like look for ways. My daughter's school, they had this thing where it's like birthday treats, right? This is so messed up, you guys. And they have like a list of like healthy snacks they could bring for their birthdays. And I was livid. I was like, this is so messed up. This is so disordered. I cannot. And so then I wrote an email to the Board of Education and the superintendent. They were very nice and responsive to me. They probably were like, who is this crazy lady? But I think it's things like that too, where it's like, I'm not going to sit back and be like, yeah, May, here, take a freaking rice cake for your birthday treat. I'm going to be like, no, my daughter's bringing freaking cupcakes, you guys, and we're going to celebrate a birthday like a normal freaking human, whatever that means. So I think also just like finding opportunities to like use your voice in that way too.
Thank you so much, Holly. We have completed our hour. There were a couple more questions, so I may offline send those to Lolly and see if we can respond and get them in the when we respond with the resources and the recording. I really appreciate, Lolly, your expertise, and you're willing to jump in and be vulnerable about this, because that's true. Like, we all have bodies, and so if we're going to talk about it, we have to be kind of in a vulnerable place. If you did write a question or a comment and didn't get a response from me, please know that you are sincerely invited to reach out to either the Eating Disorder Foundation at info@eatingdisorderfoundation.org, or to Raina, whose email was in the chat. I'll go ahead and make sure that when we send the Eventbrite, those two emails are in there as well, so that we can continue having these conversations and get you connected with support if that's something that you're looking for. Lolly, have a wonderful evening. Thank you. And
Thank
good
you
night,
all
everyone.
so very much. Have a good night.